Hello?
There we go.
We're on?
Yes,
No.
we're on. We're on.
We're on. You sure?
Yes, we're on.
Cool. Hey, welcome back,
Always
everybody, to
surprised.
DrawnBySuccess.com. This is Carlos Castellanos. I'm here with Bob Ostrom, children's illustrator, humorous illustrator, but he doesn't have his lower third on. So, Bob, welcome to the show, sir.
Hilarious, Carlos. For those of you who don't understand what we're talking about, Google offers you a title at the bottom of your screen, and for some reason mine has decided not to work today, so I don't get to promote my Bob Teaches Art website. So
Bob's title has been taken away.
I know, but enough about me, Carlos. We have a guest today.
We do have a guest today. Our guest today, I had the pleasure of meeting her recently because she had me on her blog, on her interview series where she interviews artists and painters on savvypainter.com. And her name is Antrese Wood, and she is a plein air painter, and she's going to show us how she funded her art project of going to Argentina and painting Argentina. And she's going to tell us all the do's and all the don'ts, and she's going to enlighten us to all of the pitfalls of starting a Kickstarter campaign and how to successfully launch those art projects that you might want to fund. So welcome to the show, Antrese.
Thank you. Hello. It's my favorite topic.
You got a nice bright little studio you got going on there.
I know. I can't. And usually it feels really dark in here. I have the curtains closed and everything, but yeah.
Would you do, knock down a wall just for our interview? So tell our listeners a little about you, how you got started, what you were doing prior to painting. How long have you been painting?
Let's see. Where do I start? That's always a good question. I'm originally from Los Angeles, and I live now in Argentina. I've been here for about 4 years. And before moving here, I worked at Disney Interactive for about 10, 12 years, somewhere in that range. I provided art direction for their video games. And I left that job because I wanted to pursue my painting. And so I kind of took this giant leap, quit my job, and said, okay, I'm going for it. I'm going to do everything I can to make this thing work. So I had learned a lot from watching the marketing departments and seeing what they do to market Disney products. And I applied some of that to my own work, and I just started researching galleries and researching all the different ways that you can get your artwork out. And things were going pretty well. I was starting to sell artwork. I was starting to have some shows. And then I went to a birthday party for a good friend of mine who is from Argentina. And we all decided after a couple of margaritas that it would be a great idea for all of us to go to Argentina for her brother's wedding, which was coming up. So we did that, and on that trip I met a friend of hers who, long story short, ended up being my husband. And so after a couple of years of Skyping, I decided I was going to move to Argentina to figure out if this thing really was going to work. So I moved down here. It worked. We got married, and I decided I really needed to do a project centered around Argentina because I wanted to learn more about this country, and I wanted to do a big project. So I decided that I came up with this project idea. I was going to paint my way around Argentina, go to all 23 provinces and do plein air provinces and portraits in each of the provinces. And the big questions, considering we had just gotten married, we had just had this enormous wedding, was how do I pay for this? So I did a bunch of research on crowdsourcing, and I came up with a plan to get it funded through Kickstarter. And after an enormous amount of work, it worked. And we got it funded. It came out, the budget for the project was about $25,000, and we just barely made it. I think I came in a couple $100 over.
All right, so that was your goal, 25,000?
Yeah, I did. I sat down and I basically sat down and I thought, okay, from day to day, like I get it. If I'm going to do this thing, what do I need to, what's every possible thing that I'm going to need to get it done? What equipment am I going to need? What painting supplies am I going to need? How long is it going to take? What are the gas prices throughout the country, because they kind of vary. There's a significant difference, and the inflation rate here is really, really high. So I took that into account and just thought of literally everything on a daily basis. Okay, what's a good food budget? Can I get that lower? What's a good hotel budget? How long can we go sleeping in the car, because we put that into it. It's like, okay, we'll sleep in the car, or we'll camp for 3 days and then we'll spring for a hotel.
Right, so let me back up just a little bit. When you left Disney, you said you kind of struck out on your own, but I mean, did you plan for it a little bit? Because I mean, we have people that watch this show that are probably haven't taken that step yet and aren't independent and maybe working somewhere full time and looking to make that change. So did you have money saved up, or did you just cut the line and just go and make it work?
I had money saved up, yeah. So that was part of the plan. It was a really scary thing to do. I mean, to be honest, I decided that I wanted to do it, and it took me, I think, about 6 or 7 months to actually pull the trigger. Maybe longer than that, from the time when I originally said, okay, I'm going to do this. And it's a terrifying thing to leave that stability. I mean, no matter how you cut it, it's scary. And so understanding that, or at least like knowing if you're in that position and this is something that you want to do, and you're feeling like, oh, I'm such a wuss because I've been sitting here thinking about it for so long, you're not. I mean, it's a tough call to make. But yeah, I saved up money, and I had like an idea of what I was going to do. I tried to research and plan it as much as I possibly could. And then at the end of the day, you just have to go for it. Like, I finally just went in and said, I told a couple of people, and that helped kind of, put the pressure on it, because it's one thing to have an idea of something that you want to do and it's in your head, but it's so easy to cop out because nobody knows.
Right.
So I started telling a couple of really trusted friends at work that I was thinking about doing this, and they really helped me pull the trigger.
So did you have a support system set up? Did you have people that were kind of cheering for you, or were you just kind of like, here we go, Because I know that one of the things we talk about here is about surrounding yourself with people who believe in what you're going to do and help you get there, rather than people who are going to try to talk you out of it and tell you you're crazy. What was your support system like?
I was very, very lucky, I think. My boss at Disney was somebody, I mean, I'd worked there, about 10 or 12 years, and I say 10 or 12 because I'm not really sure, because I left and then I came back. But my boss, when I told her about it, her first question was, where are you going? Like, who's stealing you away from us? And then when I told her what I was going to do, she was so excited. She was so happy and so supportive about it. So that felt really good to me, to like have those relationships built in at work, where I left on really, really good terms, and everybody there was kind of cheering me on. My family is really supportive. My friends, I think, my friends were very, very supportive too. I think some people naturally are just kind of like, whoa, you're leaving this job at Disney. You have great pay, great benefits, everything's built in, and you're going to walk away from that to be an artist. And one of the producers that I worked with, his parting shot was, I think he said, well, let me know when you get sick of eating top ramen every day, give me a call.
Nice. We're gonna have that made into a T-shirt.
I know. I'm like, I love top ramen, so it might take
a while. Yeah.
So
top
when
ramen and peanut butter are two of my favorite foods.
So when you left,
so
I mean,
yeah, having the support systems was really, really helpful, and and I did have a lot of people cheering me on, so that was super. I don't know, it's just inspiring, and it kind of makes you feel like you made the right decision. And in those moments when things aren't going as planned, it's really great to have, like those people cheering you on. It helps keep you going.
Yeah, we say it here all the time. Support and the people that you have around you is pretty much, everything.
Yeah, and there's going to be people who don't really believe in it or just don't. I don't know. I'm a planner. I'm like once I decide to do something, I'm kind of a bulldog, and so I really go for it. I think the people who know me well understood that and was like, I have no idea how she's going to do this, but I know Antrese, and she'll figure it out. So there was that kind of like, ooh, quitting a job to paint and be a fine artist. Like on the surface, that sounds really scary, but it's Antrese, so like she'll probably figure it out. Let's see what happens.
So let me ask you a question. I mean, looking back on it now, I mean, when you left, how long were you doing that prior to you moving to Argentina and starting the Kickstarter? I mean, would you consider, were you making it or were you struggling?
I was doing okay. I mean, having the savings account definitely helped, and I had some freelance work that I kept on the side always. I would say I was doing okay, and that was it was about 3 years, 2.5 years, I think, but between the time when I quit Disney until I moved here to Argentina. And I had some really great opportunities. In the middle of that was about 2008. So like I had a year of doing really well, 2008, stock market crashed, all that. So that kind of really was a frightening time because I was like, oh my God, what did I do? I really, there was times when inevitably you feel that way where you're just like, what was I thinking? Oh my God, I could be so comfortable right now. But, I don't know if it's just part of the way the world works, but, almost like as soon as I started thinking, why did I leave Disney? I had so much stability. It was so comfortable there. And right about that time, they did a bunch of layoffs. So I was like, okay, well, at least I'm going on my own terms. And at the end of the day, my view is time goes by. You can invest 5 years into working for the company, 5 more years working at the company that you're at, doing something that maybe you're not satisfied. If you're doing something that you're not satisfied with, or you can spend those 5 years developing yourself, working on your craft, and figuring out a way to build the life you want. And it's a tough call. I'm not going to say that it's for everybody. If you're happy at your work and you're happy doing your artwork on the weekends and in the morning when whatever, like if you figure out a time that works for you, go for it. Like I'm not one of those people. I don't think that that having a full-time job means that you're not an artist. It means you have a full-time job. It means you're working your butt off. And doing both.
Yeah, and I think being part of being independent, part of that is not just the money. It's really the freedom that you gain as well. I mean, and that's invaluable as far as I'm concerned. To be able to especially if you have kids or something like that, to be able to spend time with them and not miss their practices and miss their games or family issues, and the freedom that you get for your time being independent is something that can't be understated.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many. I mean, for me, it was absolutely the right choice. I've had so many opportunities and so many great things happen that never ever could have happened when I was working at Disney because I was too busy. It was too frenetic for me. Like I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, go out, paint, go to work, be in all these meetings, do all this stuff, come home at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and eat my top ramen.
So much people like
fast. And then I would be painting at night, and I would get up and do it in the morning again, and my weekends are painting and stuff. So it was definitely it was really hard, very, I don't know, just super, super constantly on the go, constantly doing stuff. And that's true now too, but I make all the calls. I decide what I'm going to invest in and what I'm not going to invest in. I decide if I want to invest in going to a conference or what I'm going to do, and it's all on me. And I think that that makes you pay a lot more attention, and I think it makes you a lot more focused in your decision making, and it makes you research things and make better decisions than if you were doing it for somebody else.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I personally, I work harder working independently than I would if I were employed by, some company,
Yeah.
because I put way more hours in. But it's on, like you say, it's on your own terms, and it's what you're willing to do. So you're calling the shots, and you do it because you like to do it, not because you have to do it. So it makes a huge difference. Let's fast forward
Yeah, I don't have
to now.
that feeling.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so you're let's fast forward to you're in Argentina, and you're in love with the country, and you want to be able to travel the provinces and paint it. What gave you the idea to start with a Kickstarter campaign?
I had a project. I had this dream project that I wanted to do, and I didn't have the money to do it. So I had to, if I wanted to do it, I had to find the funds to do it. And so I started looking around. What are my options? How can I pull this off?
And how did you figure out you alluded to it a little earlier on how you started calculating what you needed. How long did you think, how many provinces were you thinking of doing? Were you thinking of doing all 23, right off the bat? And how long did you figure it was going to take you?
Okay, so lesson in reality checks are always good. So in my head at first, I was like, okay, we're going to go to every single province in the country. It's going to take 4 months to do it. And there's 23 provinces, and it's an enormous country. It doesn't have the infrastructure that, for example, the United States does. There's, enormous patches of land that are still completely dirt road or gravel road, like for 500 kilometers straight or 3 days straight of gravel roads. And I had been told this, but I didn't really grasp the significance of it. And so my husband was like, no, just double it. Whatever time you think it's going to take, you know how it is in this country, double it. So I doubled it and the time, and then I figured out the budget for that. And I got to the 25,000. I think maybe I had $30,000 at first, and I was like, no way. That's impossible to raise that much money. It can't be done. So I sat down, and I literally, like I said, just the way that I kind of figure things out is I'm like, okay, from the minute if I'm doing this project, from the minute I wake up until I go to bed, what's going to happen? What will I need? What will I be using? What am I going to need to buy on a daily basis? All these things. Just imagining every single thing that I can possibly think of. Doing charts, graphs, getting out maps. We had enormous maps, and we're planning routes and replanning routes and figuring out, like logistically, how can it be done? Where can I go by myself? Where do I absolutely have to have my husband with me? All this stuff. And I, at one point, thought it was too much, so I thought, okay, instead of doing 23 provinces, the bottom half of Argentina is actually just 4 provinces, but they're the biggest provinces. I'm like, okay, but they were the biggest provinces, and they were half the budget because they were the most remote areas. So I'm like, okay, let's just take that out, and we can do it, in sections. And then I thought, half of that is still $13,000. That's a lot of money to try to raise. If I'm going to raise 13, then might as well just go all the way. There's no point in getting that far and leaving out what I think is the best part of the country, which is Patagonia, the glaciers, Tierra del Fuego, which is that very tip of Argentina at the very, very bottom. And Ushuaia is there. It's the southernmost city in the world. So I felt like I was leaving out the best part of the trip, and penguins and like whales and all the stuff that they have down there. So I we went back and forth. There was a time where I thought the best idea was to do 13, that it was impossible to do it, and then I decided, no, if I'm going to do it, if I'm going to go, I'm going to go big. So once I made that decision, then my next question was, who else has done this? Has anyone else raised this much money for a painting project? Because there was, Kickstarter. I ultimately chose Kickstarter as my crowdsourcing campaign rather than Indiegogo or a lot of the other ones that were out there. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But I just decided that was the way to do it. And I researched who had done it, and Amanda Palmer, her campaign was still running. It hadn't closed yet, and she had just crossed the $1 million mark. And
Wow.
if anyone hasn't heard of Amanda Palmer, she is a musician, and I would have to look it up. I don't remember what she ultimately raised, but her Kickstarter campaign was just totally kick butt, and she raised, I want to say, like $1.5 million, I think. It was an enormous amount of money, and she broke all the records for any independent musician on Kickstarter. So I was researching, because of that, there was tons of articles and interviews with her, so I was reading all those, researching those. What is she doing? What is she talking about? What is she saying? How did she handle this? One thing she said that really struck me was that, doing a crowdsourcing campaign is a full-time job. And if you think it's not, you're fooling yourself and you're going to fail. And so I had that in my head that, like, okay, at this point I was still doing the research, I was still gathering all the information. I was like, okay, when I do this, I need to be 100% dedicated in there while the campaign is running. So I found her, and I found a couple other artists that were running their campaigns, and I just started watching what they were doing and what they were not doing, what was successful and what was not. And pretty soon I could start to predict who was going to make it and who wasn't. And I used all that information. I started thinking about my own project and how I was going to present it to people, and then I just started building it and going from there. So that's kind of like a long what
Did you also promote it on Facebook as well and social media to drive people over there?
Well, what I ended up doing was a key thing that I did that was super helpful was I wrote all my story out, and the thing is to figure out, like, what exactly your project is about. What do you really want to accomplish? There's two things. There's the act of creating it, whatever it is that you're going to do, like the physical, what am I going to do? I'm going to paint 20 paintings. I'm going to go to 23 provinces. I'm going to paint 100 portraits of X, Y, and Z. That's the technical part of what you're doing, I guess, or that's the statistical part of what you're doing. The more important thing to figure out is, why are you doing this? What is it about? What would make you do that? And more importantly, why should anyone else care about your little art project? I know that sounds horrible. I know it sounds brutal. I know we never, like, it's like, what? I'm making this great artwork. Everybody should love it. They don't. Like, that's the thing that it's not that they don't. It's just that when you run a crowdsourcing campaign, it's really easy to get caught up in the idea that, if I build it, they will come, or get caught up in how many Facebook likes you have, how many tweets you have, how many, like, how popular am I? And that stuff it can be really tricky. It can be really deceiving, because being popular is one thing. Getting somebody to open up their wallet and give you money is totally different. Like, I mean, just think about it in terms of, like, how many times do you read something and go, oh my God, that's cool, click, I like it. But it's an entirely different thing to go, okay, here's my credit card number, I'm going to help you do this. That's a big jump.
Yeah, we've
So
talked about in the
being
past
really
about
clear about
creating.
that and understanding about that.
Yeah, we've
What's
talked
that?
about in the past about creating that story, that brings people on your mission, creating a mission for yourself, that gets people on board with, your movement or whatever it is that you're doing, and describing that story, because that's what people buy into.
Yeah, it's figuring out what part of what you're doing is going to get people so excited that they're going to say, not only do I think this is cool, but I'm going to help you do it. And not only am I going to help you do it, I'm going to tell all my friends that they should help you too. And those two things are pretty big to try to get somebody to do. It's not as easy as it sounds like. Like you can really underestimate it and think, well, I love my paintings. I want to do this. People should support the art, so go. you know, and finding that angle, finding that story, finding the thing that people are really going to respond to, that makes them want to sort of live vicariously through you, or makes them, for whatever reason, gets them invested in you succeeding. Not just like, I think this is cool, but they really want you to be able to do what you're doing, and they really want to watch you get this project, get the funding, and finish it.
So what emotional trigger in your project and your funding were you tapping into?
I was one thing that I did that was really helpful was I wrote out my project description. I wrote out what I wanted to do, and then I thought about all the people that I know, and I picked a couple of friends of mine who frankly are just like no BS. Like they will straight out tell me what they think, and they have no problem doing that. And they're very they can be very objective and very just like, okay, if this is your goal and this is where you want to get, I'm gonna straight up tell you what you're missing. And I picked people that were from completely different backgrounds. One piece of feedback that I got after I wrote that was like, it was kind of brutal because after 2-3 weeks of working on this, she just goes, well, yeah, I don't know, like if I would support that because I know you, but if I didn't know you, I would think you just want me to pay for a vacation, and I would definitely not give you money for that.
Interesting.
And so it's like, wow, okay, so something about the way that I've positioned this really is not resonating. And she's like, look, why did you move to Argentina in the first place? You fell in love with this man, and then you fell in love with the country. This isn't a story about discovering new places in the world. This is a story about you falling in love with this person, and then falling in love with the country and wanting to discover that. And once I started looking at it from that angle, that it was actually a story of love as opposed to an adventure of me going out and painting this country, it totally changed everything. It shifted everything, and I think that was one of the pivotal moments for me understanding what it was, kind of it was really great to have somebody else go, I don't think that's really what this is about. Like, think more clearly about what is driving you. And shifting the whole camera, if you will, to that angle really changed a lot and put the project more in focus for me.
That's cool. So how long a process is this to get this whole thing ready?
I spent, I think that this is my personal opinion, what I would advocate is, I think people have a misunderstanding with these Kickstarter crowdsourcing, whether it's Kickstarter, Indiegogo, there's lots of them out there, and they're all equally good. That you write something down, you shoot a quick video, you hit the launch button, that people just throw money at you, and it's awesome, right?
Wait, what? It's not?
Yeah.
Bob thought it was an ATM.
And again,
Oh man, there goes this afternoon's project.
Yeah, sorry. So I spent about 3 weeks at least, I'm trying to remember, 3 to 4 weeks researching everything I could about what we were going to need, how we were going to do it. Talking to my husband because, when he and his friends, because when they were, like in their early 20s, it's kind of the thing to do. You hitchhike across the country, you hitchhike all throughout South America. So talking to them about all the different places, like picking what locations I was going to do, all that stuff. I spent about 3 weeks researching that, researching Kickstarter, researching success and failure stories on crowdsourcing campaigns, all that. So there was about 3 weeks of doing that. About another week and a half or something to pull all that together and get it into a cohesive story and shoot the video and edit the video and do all that. And then the campaign itself was 5 weeks. And during the campaign itself, I was seriously working about 12 to 16 hours a day on getting those funds. It was not easy. It wasn't like, hey, everybody, I want to do this project. I need $25,000. Let's go.
Carlos would have donated the whole thing to you, I think. Should have called him.
The other thing is at the time I didn't have any following. Like I had, I think my Twitter following was like less than 100. I had nothing. Wow. And my Facebook page was for my art projects was a friend of mine had set that up for me. I had practically abandoned it. I think I had like 30, 40 friends on there or something like that, and that was it. So I was literally, from a social media standpoint, from everything starting from 0, 0, 0. So I had to really bust my butt and try to figure out a way to do it. And I think that being really prepared up front was super helpful. I wrote letters in advance. I thought about contingency plans. I thought about plan A, B, C, D. And then I just hit the ground running and went for it. And I had an enormous amount of help. Like even with all that planning of 4 weeks before the 4.5, 5 weeks before the 5-week campaign of me trying to figure it out, me doing all that researching and understanding everything. In the middle of the campaign, nothing. It's chaotic. It starts off as, like, for me, it started off as this kind of theoretical thing. That was why I chose Kickstarter as the crowdsourcing, because Kickstarter is all or nothing. If you put a goal down, you try to reach the goal. If you don't hit the goal, you get nothing. You get zero. I could have raised $2,499, and if I didn't get that one extra dollar, it would have all gone back. The way that they do it is people pledge money, and Kickstarter takes their payment information, but they don't charge anyone anything, a dime, until the end of your project, your goal date at midnight that day. If you've reached it, they charge everybody's credit card. If you don't, they just delete it all. So that was why I chose Kickstarter, because I was nervous about it, and I thought, okay, well, I don't want to, I realized that was the amount of money I need through all the research, that I couldn't do it for less. And so I didn't want to promise people this enormous project, get half of the funds, and not be able to finish it. So that's why I chose Kickstarter over Indiegogo, which with Indiegogo you can do it based on, the way Indiegogo works is you raise whatever amount of money you raise, that's what you get. So I could have done Indiegogo and raised $1,000 and been $23,000 short and been like, I told all these people I was going to go all around Argentina and I don't have any money to do it.
Right. That makes sense. So
that might be perfectly appropriate for different projects. That was my case, and that was why I chose that. But there can be, valid reasons for
less than $23,000, or the money that you had estimated, you weren't going to be able to get the project done. So there was no sense in collecting anybody's money at that point.
Yeah, I was really concerned about that because I just didn't want to. Frankly, I just didn't want to screw anybody over. Like that was really. It just seemed like such a large amount of money, and I wanted to make sure that I was able to do it.
Now, you mentioned writing letters. And not having a large following on Twitter or social media. the letters that you were writing, did you reach out to people who already had a following, a large enough following? Did you try to leverage other people's following to try to build momentum for your project? How did you go about from not having a very large social media presence to getting enough people following you and finding out about your project?
I reached out to every possible connection that I had. One of the statistics that I found was that only out of any crowdsourcing campaign, only 20% of what you raise comes from friends and families. So you need to have a plan for that other 80%. And so I thought of every, like when I talk about every possible angle, I was thinking of okay, it's a painting project. Other artists are going to be interested in it. Okay, it's about Argentina. Maybe people from Argentina or expats are going to be interested in it. So I started looking at it from that angle. In terms of, and I started reaching out to all of those people. And in terms of getting somebody with a big following, I did do that, but it actually was not on purpose. Somewhere in the middle of the project, in the middle of the campaign, I should say, it was a 5-week campaign. At first, the donations were coming in, and so like if you looked at the money I was raising, it was like this. It was just like.
You're like, woohoo! Yeah.
I'm like, yeah! I was like, oh my god, this is amazing! I can. Whatever, if it keeps up like, and of course in my head it was going to keep up like this. So I'm like, I'm gonna double it. That's amazing. Wow, okay, how can I like make the project even bigger? Because obviously I'm gonna kill it. And then so this is what happens. It goes like this, and then all of a sudden it just goes. And when it was doing that sort of flat line, like I saw it, honestly, I saw that as a flat line. What it really is a plateau. I was seeing like it going from this to, okay, we're flatlining, we're dead, calling the medics, oh my god. And I totally freaked, I panicked. I was sure I was going to, at that point, I was sure I was going to fail, and I had written to everybody I knew. I'd written to my hometown newspaper, did this enormous article on it. My school,
so pressure's on.
The Art Center Design was listing it. I was like, everybody who knows me is going to know I tried this big thing and I fell flat on my face. And like, this is going to be horrifying. So there was a time when I thought, at that moment, I was like, I should just pull the plug and start it over. This is never going to work. And I called Pamela Slim, who she just wrote a book called Body of Work, and she also wrote a book called Escape from Cubicle Nation. So like I think some of your listeners will really love that book. And I had done some coaching with her, and I called her, and I'm like, and I hadn't talked to her for like a year, and I called her, I'm like, Pamela, oh my god, what did I do? I just came up with this enormous project and it's gonna fail, oh my god. And she kind of talked me down off the ledge, and she's basically like, what you need to start asking people who have already committed to the project to help you spread the word. And I didn't want to do it because I felt like I had already asked them for enough. I'd already asked them to give me their money. I was already harassing them enough on Facebook and every possible, and email and everything I possibly could think of to get their attention. And now the ones that had responded and had been very generous to me, I'm going to ask them to do more. And to me, that felt like I was too shy, too scared. I don't know. I was just like, I can't ask them to do anymore. And she's like, she reframed it for me, and she just said, they did this for you because they believe in you and they believe in your project. They want you to succeed. And I bet that if you reach out to them and come up with, a specific thing that you're asking them to do that's not costing them money, that they're going to do it. And she was right. And so I came up with a plan of like, okay, I'm going to ask people to just email 5 people or something. And she did it also. And so she she worked it into, she was doing like a video thing, and she worked in a couple comments about my project on her blog and in her video that she was making for her blog, and like 2 or 3 times she like very casually mentioned it. And that combined with just reframing everything and then going back to the people who had already helped me out was just enormous for me. And so that was one of the ways that I was able to turn that corner and not quit.
That's a big lesson there for a lot of people.
Success is you don't quit.
That's a huge message for a lot of the people listening. The reframing of how you're looking at it, and to approach those who are already supporting you, because they do want you to succeed. And that, that's with clients like yours, like collectors or people who are helping you in crowdfunding, or whether it be just clients doing commercial work, existing clients or people, happy existing clients or past clients or people who are more likely to support you than someone who doesn't know you. So that's a powerful little tidbit there that I hope people wrote down for future reference.
Yeah, I love that, because a lot of times we sit here and we talk ourselves out of things that we think, oh, nobody's going to be with me on this, and by the time you're done, you feel so demoralized. It's really great to have somebody in your corner kind of pushing you along too, and saying, hey, you know what, this is the way it works, and then you get out there and you do it. And what were the reactions that you got from the people that you asked? Were they like, yeah, let's do it, or did they?
Yeah, some people said no. Some people said I'm not comfortable doing that, and some people were like, yeah, I will absolutely do whatever I can. And some people just said yes and then forgot. I mean, that happens too. I would say that the thing is to understand a couple things: the personality of the people that you're asking, and not basically just not take things personally when they don't go your way. Just focus on what you're doing, your goals, your project, and that just stay focused on that, and not take people's lack of, I don't want to say lack of interest, like just to me, the way I took it is it really comes down to personality. For me, if I think about my resistance to asking them to help again, that was because I was really afraid of bothering them, of asking too much, of basically just bothering them, just being like, please give me money, please give me money. Like, it felt like, in my head, it sort of felt like I was begging for money. And so that reframing that Pamela gave me helped me around that. But you have to understand, too, that the people that you're asking, they have their own sort of internal things, and they might not be comfortable doing some of the things that you are asking for them to help. And so you have to accept that and not take it personally, and not get upset with them for not, jumping on the bandwagon even more than they already have.
But you got to ask. I think that's the important message, that you ask. I mean, the worst that can happen is that nobody does anything, but what's going to happen if you don't ask?
Well, yeah, and also understanding that people, it comes down to that support group, right? I mean, we were talking about that a little bit earlier in terms of when you're thinking about quitting your job and going out on your own, whether it's freelancing or pursuing fine art or starting your own business, whatever it is, that's scary, and getting the right people around you is really important in having that support group. The other thing I think is really important about that concept is understanding the strengths and the weaknesses of the people who are around you, and not counting people out because you might be focused on this one piece of the puzzle, and there's a certain type of person that can help you with that one piece of the puzzle. Because person B didn't help you with that doesn't mean that they don't care, or that they're never going to help you. It's just that one thing that you ask them to do, they're not comfortable with it. So the trick is, I think, is to find, if you find the people who are going to support you, who love what you do, and who are really invested in your success. That's really important. Second part of it is understanding those people and understanding what their personality, what kind of help their personality is likely to give. For example, I'm trying to think of a really good example of that. Like, you could bring it down to the extrovert-introvert thing. Like, somebody who's really extroverted is not going to have any problem talking you up to everybody that they know. I have friends, I have a couple of friends I can think of right now who, when I need them to, when I ask them to, they will push me. Like, they will talk up all their friends, their grandmothers, their neighbors. They'll be telling everybody about what I'm doing and how great it is, because that's their personality. Somebody else who's more introverted, they're not going to be comfortable doing that, but they may help you in other ways. For example, I had a writer friend of mine who wasn't comfortable doing that, but he was comfortable helping me draft all the letters that I needed to write. So that was the help he was able to give. My mother, for example, she's going to turn, this year, she's going to turn 80.
Wow.
So she was, like 70-something. She's not going to, like, as she's my mom, she wants me. She would do anything for me. But all the technical stuff of whatever, sharing it on Facebook, sharing it on Twitter, emailing people, she's not really comfortable with that. What she was comfortable doing was printed postcards and handing them out and talking me up to everybody on the street. The entire city where I grew up in, I swear everybody knows that I did this project because my mom was walking around with postcards at the dog park, at city council meetings, or whatever, just saying, hey, my daughter's doing this, take this. So that was her strength. So understanding that, whether it's for a Kickstarter project or whether it's for you deciding to leave your job and everything you need to do after that, is really think about when you ask people for their help, don't just focus on whether or not they say yes or no. Think about what they're good at and be strategic about what you ask them to do based on their personality.
Excellent. So let's move forward a little bit. So how far along have you been on this project now? And I remember the last time when you interviewed me on your site, you had mentioned that there were a couple of things that you would tell people to watch out for in terms of, I think it was one of the things was the original paintings that you had, like what you had offered people that were donating, the different steps and the different stages. You want to get into that a little bit and where you are in the process right now, and some of the do's and don'ts.
Ooh, some of the do's. I think it. Excuse me. It depends a lot on the size of the project. So I would say prepare for the worst, but plan for the best, right? I gave away almost all original artwork because I felt like I'm asking people to give me their money. I need to give them something really great in return. So I didn't want to do prints because I felt like that was kind of like, but going through the project, I'm trying to like think of how to explain this in a way that's not just specific to my project. Think of things that will make your backers. Think of rewards that will really make your backers feel appreciated, but don't make your work so hard that it's like crazy to fulfill them all. I ended up having to do like 200-something paintings for the backers, and while trying to travel around Argentina and get that out. So I think when I've talked to a lot of other people who've done successful Kickstarter projects, because I'm actually working on I'm doing like a little special thing on Savvy Painter about crowdfunding and Kickstarter. So I've been talking to a lot of other artists who have done successful projects in crowdsourcing. And when I told them that I gave away all original artwork, they were just like, "You what?" They couldn't believe it because, yeah, it's an enormous amount of work. So on the one hand, you have to think about your production costs for whatever whatever rewards you're giving out, but then also you have to think of your time and your sanity. And I think that if I were going to do it again, I would think of rewards that I could either manufacture or that I could do in such a way that it wouldn't take so much of my personal time, because that was kind of a bottleneck.
Now, when you're starting a Kickstarter, when you're starting a Kickstarter campaign, though, I mean, you have different people backing you at different levels. So you weren't offering, there might be like a minimum level that people come in at, and of course they can back you, for several hundred or even thousands of dollars if they wanted to. I guess it's all depending on how you structure it. But who was getting the original paintings? I mean, was everybody getting an original painting, or how did you structure that?
I structured mine. I did like little thumbnail watercolors for, I don't remember, I think $50. And I did think, a little bit ahead, did postcards and stuff like that. But I would say, yeah, people can donate on. I'll talk about Kickstarter because that's the one that's clear in my head right now. People can donate anywhere. The minimum is $1, and the maximum is $10,000 because of they run their payments through Amazon. So $10,000 is the maximum amount of money that Amazon can accept. So that's the maximum amount that anyone could give on Kickstarter. And so I just thought of different rewards in between that I felt like would be really valuable. And so, yeah, starting at $50, you got a watercolor. And I think I ended up giving, no, I'm pretty sure, it was $50 for watercolors, and then it went up to, I think, $6,000.
Okay. All right,
Did I answer your question at all? Did I feel like I didn't answer your question?
No, I think so. I mean, so you had mentioned the things to do is creating the story, a strong story, and getting out in front of those people that are going to help you the most, right? Your inner circle, let's say, the people that support you the most, and then have them help you spread that word. And then from as far as things to watch out for, was watching your own time investment on the things that you're offering your backers, on your rewards, and see how you can leverage some of those things. Now, on the 200 and some odd paintings that you did, were you able to did you take pictures of them? Were you able to make prints of them and kind of do other things with them and leverage that time and effort?
All of them were photographed and scanned before I sent them out, and then I'm working on a book for hopefully the end of this year with all the images. So that part will be repurposed, if you will, later on, but that wasn't part of the Kickstarter campaign, and I think that would be a good thing to do. I think that anything that you can do that you can figure out a way to continually promote your work. I guess what I'm trying to get at is try to think of ways that are sort of a win-win. That's something that's really valuable for your backers, and if it can be valuable to you promoting your work or you getting your work out as well, that's awesome. That's so try to go for those two. If you can only get one, obviously, while you're crowdsourcing, you want to give the most valuable thing you can to your backers, and really show that you appreciate them giving you their hard-earned money.
Yeah, there's other people that can back you in other projects down the road as well. So.
Yeah, and they become your fans, and they really become invested in what you're doing and watching you succeed.
So did you complete the project? Are you done with it, or are you still working on it?
I think I'm gonna be working on this forever. In terms of the travel, so there was, so now we can get into, like, I was trying not to talk about this, but it's pretty specific to my project. Some of the, I'll tell you some of the obstacles, challenges that I had with this project, and that was, let's see, doing it in a foreign country. There was a lot of things that I personally could not anticipate. As much as I tried to, my husband was helping me plan the whole thing along the way. Like, I was bouncing ideas off of him constantly, trying to get reality checks. What can I, what obstacles can I expect while I'm trying to do this? And as somebody who's from here, he knows there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of stuff that happens here that you have no control over. There's a fair amount of corruption in the government, I would say, and inflation is just out of control, and there's a lot of stuff going on. So some of the things that I didn't anticipate were getting my artwork out of the country turned out to be a really big deal, a really, really big deal. That was, for me, one of the hardest things. And some of the things that affected that is there's this sort of arbitrary rule that they have here that we did not anticipate, and it changes constantly. So that's another thing that was difficult about it. But basically, they came up with this thing that, like, okay, we're worried about artwork being stolen, so we are going to control what artwork leaves the country. And so that meant that I had to go to an office in Buenos Aires to show them the artwork, have an official appraiser appraise the artwork, put a value on it. Then I had to take those documents to the National Bank, which is open 2 hours every third Tuesday or whatever it is, and then pay them money in order to get the paperwork, which then had to be notarized, and then FedEx would mail it for me, right? So there's this enormous thing that had to happen. And what ended up happening was that law apparently applies only to mail, and so basically what I ended up doing was smuggling my own artwork out of the country by airplane. Like, that was mail, and so I would find people who were leaving the country. I would find people I knew really well, friends I knew who were really well, who were either going to the U.S. or Europe, and I would pack everything up and I would give it to them and say, when you get out of the country, please mail this for me.
Wow, that's quite a story.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. So there's no way I could anticipate that. There's also been, like, pretty severe economic and political swings happening here, and so there was that affected the project pretty significantly too. There was, in particular, there was a period where the police force in the city closest to where we live, which is Cordoba, it's about 2.5, 3 million people, the police force just walked off the job. Completely just said, we're not working anymore, and they walked off. So there was massive riots and looting and all this crazy stuff, which is just very frightening and very scary. And the infrastructure here just doesn't work the same way. So, for example, I'm from Los Angeles, and we had the LA riots in the 90s. And, when that happened, the LAPD was able to call in other cities to help them bring back order and calm. And there's a National Guard that you can call in, and all these things that you can do when things get really crazy. It doesn't really exist here. And so it was absolute anarchy. And the result of that was, again, there's quite a fair amount of corruption here. So this police force in this city, in this very large city near where we live, went on strike. Eventually, of course, they got what they wanted, and they came back to work, and things went back to normal. But the ripple effect of that was other police departments all across the country said, well, Cordoba just got a big pay raise, we want one too. And so it sort of dominoed all throughout the country, where police forces would just stop working, and then there'd be this massive rioting, people taking advantage of the fact that there was no police and wiping out stores and stuff. So that that was it was kind of hard to keep traveling during that time because I just didn't feel safe, and there was other periods where it was just really difficult to be able to plan a trip. And so what ended up happening was I got all the surrounding provinces near where I live. I was able to get those done pretty easily because of all those delays and because of the writing and because of the I'm not going to say it's like unstable, but it was just kind of a little iffy. I was no longer comfortable going out on my own. And so that meant that I had to wait for a chunk of time when my husband could close his work down. He has his own business. He would shut his work down, and then we would go out, do a section of the trip, and come back. And then go out. So we basically shut his business down like 4 times during the past year to get the project done. So there was, like I said, an enormous amount of help that I had from people on Kickstarter. My husband, I just can't even, for him to do that, the support that he gave me was phenomenal.
Yeah, so those are the things obviously you couldn't foresee, from the beginning.
Yeah.
So are you done with the project, or are you still, or you're wrapping it up?
The last place that I really wanted to go is a place called Iguazu, which is on the border of Argentina and Brazil. And our trip there got delayed because of weather. That was another one where we were down south, and it was too close to winter, so we had to turn back and come back up. And we were going to go to Iguazu, which is it's this enormous waterfall. It's one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. It makes Niagara Falls look like a leaky faucet. It's just massive. But apparently there was massive rains in the Amazon, so for the first time in I think 60 years they closed the park because it was flooded, and so we got turned back by that one too. But I'm still determined to get there. So that is the last place that I insist on going, and I think when my husband could take another week off of work, we're planning on going in June.
So in closing, in terms of let's just look at the numbers in terms of the money raised. Was it enough, or was it short? Looking back on it now, the amount of time that you spent, the amount of travel, and the amount of time and effort that you've had to put into the project, where would you say it fell on there?
I'd say mostly because of all those unforeseen things, which is why I was kind of like. I don't know if that really applies. It applies in a way, because if you're going to do something, you want to minimize your unknowns. Being in a foreign country, you're going to have a lot of unknowns that you can't anticipate. And so the way that the money broke down was, I raised $25,000. I had it written down. Here I could find it, but basically, you're going to pay approximately 5% to Kickstarter or whatever crowdsourcing group that you use, and then there's another 3 to 5% that Amazon gets for processing all the credit cards, and then you set aside 25% or 30% or whatever tax bracket you're in, because the IRS is going to want that. And then you have the rest for your projects, and and that was broken. I broke that down by materials and all that. I ended up, because we were delayed so much, and because my husband had to close his business so many times in order for us to do this, I did end up pulling money out of my own pocket to finish this project. But I think that if it hadn't been for riots and flooding and 18 degrees below zero, and then closing off the pass in the Andes that we needed to cross, I think I would have been just fine. But those
having to smuggle your own work into the country.
These are things that they don't talk about when you start those campaigns, right?
Yeah.
Well, I just hope nobody in Argentina watches this video and comes knocking on your door. I just hope nobody in Argentina is watching this interview and comes knocking on your door. You smuggled what?
No,
Any
it was
closing?
it was it was absolutely it was totally worth it. I had so many experiences in these all these places that we went to. I have so many stories from this project of the travels and everything that was just phenomenal. Like I could talk about that for another hour, but I don't think your listeners can stand it.
Well,
But yeah,
you
I mean,
got
those are the things that went wrong. But there was so much that went right that made it so worth it. And you know, like that was just the do's and the don'ts. And there was some pretty extreme things in there, but it's a good. It's a good country. I love it.
Well, it allowed you to get your project, your own personal project that you loved and that you wanted to see uh, launch. And it allowed you to do that, and also allowed you, whether financially, you broke even or had to give out of your own pocket at some point. Um, they funded an enormous amount of valuable experience for you that you just can't put a price on. What you went through the last year, learning the things that you did, and not only learning about the specific situations, but just what you're capable of doing is invaluable.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it pushed me. I mean, so in terms of like building a project and getting something out of it beyond what money can buy you, for example, this pushed me beyond my limits in so many ways, and I've grown and learned so much from it. I thought that I knew a lot about marketing and selling your artwork before I start this. Like I said, I was really keyed into what the marketing department at Disney was doing, and then when I left that and I started my own stuff, I was watching galleries. I would get on gallery mailing the mailing lists of all these different galleries, and I would really like analyze what they were doing and think about why they were doing it. And so I think that I had a pretty good take on what it take, like I don't know, I guess I would say I had like really I feel like I had a pretty good handle on all the different resources, all the different what methods that you can use to promote and sell your artwork. And then doing this project and getting thrown all these curveballs and going from zero to zero followers to raising that amount of money. It was an enormous amount of money. I think that statistically, I wish I had it right in front of me, but the vast majority of Kickstarter projects or crowdsourcing projects for specifically artists is about $5,000. So what I was able to do was well beyond the average, and I would love to. Actually, I'm going to try to research this more on the Kickstarter and crowdsourcing thing that I'm working on. But while I was doing, or just after I finished it, a friend of mine sent me this article that about Kickstarter and art projects specifically, and I'm really glad he sent it to me after I had finished it, because it was like only 5% of them get funded.
Wow.
of art painting projects. Only 5% of them hit their mark, which is pretty amazing. So I'm glad I didn't know that before I started. Although now that I do know that, I understand why. Having gone through all this, I think I understand why. And yeah, I feel like I've just kind of become this crowdsourcing expert. So.
Well, and it goes to show you that.
That's so much.
And it goes to show you, being active and just getting being in motion with your idea, whatever it is that you want to try to do, versus sitting on the fence trying to wait for everything to be perfect, is more valuable than waiting.
Totally.
Research, get the information, but there's nothing like getting in the game and actually doing it and making mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes no matter what, and getting those mistakes done and learning from them and continuing forward. So I think that's a big takeaway here, Antrese, is what you've been able to do is to have the courage to be able to pursue the idea without having to wait for things to be perfect or know everything before you get started.
Yeah, and I think one big change for me now after I've gone through this is, I talked about that period where I kind of hit that plateau, and I really honestly, my husband came home and one day, and I was like, I'm just gonna pull the plug and I'll start over again. And that reaction, that just like not wanting to fail in front of everybody, in a way, I'm kind of glad I had it and I didn't do it, and everything I think turned out well. But it really showed me in a very hardcore way um, that that fear of failure, and the fear that I had was that I was going to fall flat on my face, and that I don't know what I thought, that everybody was going to be really disappointed at me, or that like everybody would be like, ah ha ha, and laugh. But since I started this project, since I've gone through everything, since like I got countless really wonderful things that happened, there were so many obstacles along the way that we just pushed through it, got around them, went over them, went under them, whatever. Um, it kind of taught me that now I kind of feel like if I'm not in feeling like at any second I might fall completely flat on my face, then I'm not really trying and I'm not pushing myself outside of my comfort zone. And I think that's so important to your work, whether that means you're going to try painting in a different way, or it can be something simple, which I think if you look at like the trajectory of my life or my past history or whatever, I worked at Disney. One time I quit that and I moved to Alaska, and then I went back to Disney, and then I quit again and I did something else, and like it can look like I had this really kind of crazy that I take risks all the time, but I think that taking risks is sort of like a muscle that you can build. And so when I first started doing things, like taking a risk for me was doing something really silly, like like I don't know what, like I remember when I would be painting and stuff, that I would want to try something and I wouldn't want it to fail, and so like I would just say like, okay, I'm gonna paint 100 really shitty paintings, and I'm gonna like fail on purpose, and that was a big risk for me, right, at that moment. So point being that I took this, what can be seen if you just look at that one little piece of, I just did a portrait of Argentina and did this crazy project and traveled all around Argentina and raised all this money, and what a big risk taker she is. If your risk is just, I want to show my artwork, I want to start showing my artwork to other people. So maybe that's something that for you is really outside of your comfort zone. Try to work on that. And yeah, you can do a Kickstarter project for that too if that's what you need to get it off the ground. Do a Kickstarter project for $2,000 and do your own show. Rent a place, do your own show, whatever. But try to, take the risks that you're comfortable taking, and eventually you're going to start, those risks aren't going to seem so big anymore, and you'll be able to push yourself further and further and further.
Yeah, it's something you adjust to and get used to. I usually tell people, you have to get comfortable feeling uncomfortable. And feeling uncomfortable, like you said, for many people it might be a small thing. For many people it's a different level, but you always have to be pushing yourself to a point where there's an element where you feel uncomfortable in what you're doing, a little uneasy, because that's where you're pushing the boundary. I used to have a coach tell me that if you're not feeling overwhelmed, you're not trying hard enough. You always have to feel a sense of overwhelm in either the things you're doing or the things you're learning, because that's when you're growing. That's if you're in a safe place and you're doing the same things all the time that you're comfortable with, you're really not growing.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's scary to like now I'm at the point where I really feel that, I really see that. I started Savvy Painter, which I'm doing a podcast now, and when I did the Kickstarter campaign and I did the video, I told you this when we did our interview for Savvy Painter, that I was so afraid to speak on camera and to make the video that what I ended up doing was a silent movie, because I just couldn't do it. And now I do a podcast, and I'm sitting here and doing Google Hangout with you. Like at the time, that's a great example. Something to me at that time, couldn't do it. Way too far out of my comfort zone. No way. And you just keep growing that muscle and keep pushing yourself.
Well, Antrese, thank you for sharing your story with us today. Where can people find you? I mean, I know it's savvypainter.com, obviously. So, where else can they find you? Where else can they find you on Twitter and Facebook?
At Twitter, I'm Antrese Wood, which is ANTRESEWOOD at Antrese Wood, and then my artwork is on antrese.com. So it's right. No, can't do it. Right there. So it's ANTRESE.com.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so we'll put the show links in there so that people can find you easily. Once again, thank you. We seem to have lost Bob.
Yeah.
But once again, thank you so much for joining me and returning the favor of showing up on my show. So we kind of did them both ways. So that's kind of cool. And I met a new friend along the way.
Yeah, and this is my first video interview. So that was another thing. I told you when you asked me, I'm like, I don't know, it's gonna be on video. I don't know. I'm a little camera shy. Yeah, I was gonna do my little puppets.
Right, yeah. All right, Antrese, thanks again. For anyone wanting more information on Antrese, we'll have the links below the video in the post. For anyone who wants to find Bob, since he's not here to speak for himself and he was missing his lower third during the whole video, you can find Bob Ostrom at bobteachesart.com. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach me at drawnbysuccess.com or email me directly at carlos@drawnbysuccess.com. And again, we hope this interview with Antrese has been inspiring, instructional, and gives you the motivation to pursue your creative passion. So until next Friday for the Friday Google Hangouts with Carlos and Bob, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Antrese.
Bye. Thank you.